Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with my sister. This episode, we're going to dive into relationships, friendships, our friendship. So where do we want to start? We want to start with relationships, our relationships.
We were 7 years old and we were on blank soccer team.
Let's start with our partnerships and then get into our friendship.
You mean our partner?
Our significant others.
Ours, yes.
Because, again, like our journey has been so similar, and part of that similarity is the type of men that we are with, and similar in their strong-willed nature, I guess. I'm trying to put this very kindly. Very, very, I think we're very lucky. I think we both have incredible, incredible partners. Loving, thoughtful, loyal, trustworthy, all the really great things. What they are also is strong men. And I think for us, I'll let you speak for you, I'll speak for me, but I think that piece of him became very hard for me, where, different decision maker, very opinionated and in a good way, but where we didn't align, or where there was a lot of conflict, and really valuing that piece of him, but also struggling with that piece of him, and kind of stepping back and realizing that I do value his strength, and I don't think I would want to be with somebody that is not as strong as him, but really trying to navigate that piece, and how challenging that was for me, and our communication styles being different sometimes, decision-making styles being very different, having really hard conversations about next steps. That was hard. And what was hard for my relationship too was just, again, the uncertainty, and now looking back, I really put a lot of pressure on him. I had so much pressure I was putting on myself, and wishing I honored more where he was and what his needs were. But I was so caught in needing answers, and when I wasn't getting them from him, it was really hard. So it's just really interesting in that way, where you can have a characteristic or a trait of someone you really, really respect and value and want in your partner, but also seeing that as like this really big hurdle or challenge.
Yeah, no, we definitely saw eye to eye on this. My partner is similarly strong, opinionated. I think of him as a solid rock. Like he totally knows where he stands, and not a great communicator, self-proclaimed on his part. I am a psychologist. I grew up with a social worker mom. We talk a lot. So I do think now I'm getting feedback from families and members and people who come out of the woodworks now that we're engaged about like how much I've helped him along, which I did not realize, which is wild, because it felt like I was hitting a wall a lot, where I would bring things up and he just had a tough time. He's someone who says he speaks through his actions, and it's actually true, but it makes it really hard to have conversations with someone who speaks through their behavior.
Yeah, that's where they align. I think they're very similar too. Their love language is I'm blanking now as a therapist.
Certainly not words.
Acts of service. Acts of service. No,
and
Rob is a total acts of service guy.
Right.
But and I think you and I are similar in that we don't need a ton of affirmation, but like it is nice sometimes to hear. And Rob as well, I think we've done a really great job in growing in strengthening our communication, but also by no means is he like an emotional person, overly communicative person. Like he's willing to sit down and have the conversations with me, but he's not initiating those conversations. And I think that was another thing that was hard for both of us. Is that I think we took on that burden too, of we were the ones initiating these conversations, and the anxiety around that and the fear around that, especially with two men that aren't totally communicative, totally emotionally expressive. That was really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, we would talk a lot about like timing. Like, I don't feel like tonight's the right night, right?
It felt like that. It felt like I always like this double dutch of like when would be the right time. And I think sometimes for us, we rationalized away talking to them because we were afraid. And you and I have talked about like just sort of this disparity of how we show up professionally, like is really
wild.
Confident, well spoken, sort of unafraid. And then you dive into your personal life and you're kind of like, I don't want to say that thing. I'm really nervous to say that thing.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's really odd experience to come off a work day where I'm very opinionated. I mean, I'm a good team member, but I think I people know what I'm thinking. And if I have any kind of issue or whatever, I bring it up, and it's not. And then you get home and you're like, this really big thing to talk about, and it feels daunting, and there's a lot of fear about, I think, because of how important it is to you, like that you're gonna mess it up or lose something that's important to you if you don't talk about it the right way. And the reality is that I bring things up, and sometimes it went really well, in the sense that we talked. They were difficult, or nothing happened at all, or right, and it would just be really scary. It's scary. That's the reality. And so you're kind of battling up against fear. And really, I think it's fear of loss. That something you might say might mess everything up, which isn't true. And that comes with the rocks that are our partners, that like, they're not going to be rocked too easily. So no. We might be rocked.
We're rocked internally. Like, we're totally rocked.
We're just like, yeah, it was extremely difficult.
I think what was hard for me too is that, you know, again, sort of this achievement framework and actionable steps and control and all these things is like to have these conversations and have no results or plan. Like, okay, because I would want to go into a lot of these conversations like, what are we doing? What's the step? What's the plan?
And have an outcome there.
Yes.
At the end of that conversation.
Yes.
Never happens.
No.
And actually, what's interesting, now I can say this on some level, is those conversations matter. They do make a difference. They just, I think a lot of, it may be the woman in the relationship, the man, whatever, they need to marinate over it. And again, like, you don't know the difference you're making, and those conversations aren't futile. Like, they do matter, but they don't feel like they do in the moment.
You know what's really interesting as you're saying that, I'm thinking also too, and you know, maybe this is just specific to my relationship, but I'm going to share it if it's helpful to anybody else, and can be so counterintuitive for me as somebody that wants to be communicative. And I'll own I'm not the best communicator either. Like, it's a work in progress for me too. But I think that for me, for my relationship for Rob, the value in not communicating sometimes and just taking like my foot off the gas pedal and just like stepping back and being and connecting and, you know, and that's kind of where I've been this month is doing that. And that feels so counterintuitive because I want like, let's talk, let's make a plan, let's have action, let's have resolution. And sometimes that's so counterproductive to him and his process. And sometimes it's more beneficial if I just like, let's just back up. Let's just back up and not even like talk about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's like this weird balance because I think, yes, finding the right time and the right moment, but there's also almost never a right moment. Unless every once in a while things would come up organically, or I would just reach my breaking point, right? And I'd be like, I can't even hold it in. But we would have conversations, again, in the car, where you would give me, I'd be like, I need a deadline. Like, I need you to tell me, like, to check in with me in 2 days, and if I'm not said something. That was so important. You would check in, you'd text me, like, have you had it yet? I'd be like, no, it's just, we're having a really good night. And it was just such a nice thing to have some level of accountability because there is so much fear. I mean, I'd find myself being like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2, you know.
What's so interesting, you bring up about like, I don't want to do it now because we're having such a good time. And, you know, I certainly have that narrative. I know a lot of my clients like have that narrative too. When you're trying to like do the dance of when do I bring up this really big, heavy thing. And that is a lot of the things we tell ourselves, like, oh, but I was having such a good time and I want to ruin the time. It's like, it's kind of the best time. You're really connected. You're both deregulated. You're in this good emotional space. But also to your point, I don't think there's ever a really good time to have hard conversations because it's hard and it's scary and it's vulnerable. And
I think we worry a lot about protecting and like not making them feel uncomfortable because it is very uncomfortable for people who are not good with their words and having these tough conversations, whereas I'm very comfortable with that. Not to say it was a hard process, but the talking part isn't hard for me.
Yeah, I think the initiation is just the hardest. And then once you're in it,
though I would talk in circles and he'd have no idea what I was saying because I'd be nervous. But like my psychologist would say, why can't he feel uncomfortable? What's wrong with making him uncomfortable? Why do we need to protect? And I was like, that's interesting, right? And I think it is, we have so much empathy, I think partly because of what we do, where I can get a sense of like, what do I feel like he's going to feel like in this conversation? So there's a lot of like too much perspective taking, where you have to be like, no, I need to do this for myself because it's important to me and I need to make life decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that was an important piece, is to not feel like you have to protect all the time either.
I think we both did that
Yeah,
with them. And then sometimes in saying we're protecting them, we're like, are we protecting them, or are we protecting ourselves? Yeah, they're tough conversations to have. And I would just say to anybody that's listening, kind of piggybacking off what you just said, is deciding what's important to you and deciding what you really need, and sort of pushing through that fear and having those conversations. Because for me, it felt heavier to hold those conversations than to actually have them.
Yeah. I mean, I have like flashbulb memories of those conversations. I can tell you everywhere I was.
Sure.
And there weren't a lot of them. And that was important. Like, you don't need to talk, to your point, all the time. It's not good for your relationship. But finding those moments and getting that out and being really truthful with where you are is important for them to know. Even if it's a burden for them to carry, that's okay.
Well, because we're really carrying it by not. Yeah. And I think that, another piece of advice I would share is just checking in with yourself. And if it's getting too heavy by not talking, which was my experience, and then it would manifest. I was communicating with him in a lot of really shitty ways, because the way I was just manifesting all my stress, anxiety, sadness in stupid little fights. So I'm communicating to him, but not about the right thing and not about it in the right way. And that was just really, really harmful to our relationship. So, that would be my advice to anybody listening, is that check in with yourself. And if it's starting to get really heavy and it's starting to erode your daily life, erode your emotional, health, project out in little fights in your relationship, it's probably a clear time to push through that fear and have the conversation.
Yeah. For me, it was more if I was withdrawing and it's almost
I did that too.
Passive aggressive. He'd be like, what's wrong? Nothing. What's wrong? Nothing. There was so much that I wanted to say, but I was silent, right? And so eventually it came out.
Right.
But
so
it was after
that's your nonverbal communication. You're communicating something, but then we're not.
He's aware of the behaviors, and that's something that he can read pretty well. And he would try, and it was all these right moments for me to bring it up, because he'd literally ask me what was wrong and what was going on. I'd be like, nothing.
How often is that the response? I know. It's hard. I mean, relationships are hard, and I think, we've talked about this on other episodes. Finding the partner is not the cure-all.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you said something from the Russian lady. Did you share that one? I think she was
Oh,
Russian.
my God.
Like this old woman, right?
Yeah, but who told me this? Because
it's a hearsay. It's like maybe it's like a fable.
She's like, you ladies, you want, an old friend of mine told me this, and it was like her waxer or something, and she's very thick Russian accent, and she said, you ladies want 10 things. You want this, you want that, you want the 10. She's like, you get 2. You get 2.
I thought
only
it was 3.
Or 3. Maybe it's 2 or 3. But
what are your 2 or 3 things that you need in that person, because they are not going to be everything? And
they're not. And the expectation that they would is really, it can be damaging.
For those perfectionists in us.
Yes. So that's, I think that covers our relationships and our men who we love very, very much.
Very much, yeah.
So let's dive into friendships. Let's dive into our friendship, but I also want to talk about other friendships and how we're navigating friendships with women that might not be where we are. So we have known each other for 35 years. We would have endless sleepovers, like multiple day sleepovers. Yeah. Now as a parent, I'm like, would I want someone else's kid in my house for 5 nights in a row? And I'm like, what did my parents do with it? They were probably having a good old time.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
But they equaled out. If you weren't at our house, we were at your house, right? Etc. And we've kind of been through every life stage together, and obviously we're sharing how we've been on this journey together. And so I got pregnant in October. I found out I was pregnant, and you're in Boston.
Yeah.
So, and my parents are retired in Rockport, Massachusetts, which is about 40 minutes from Boston. And we hadn't told any of our families yet. And we were going to be there. We were going to be in Rockport at the beginning of December. Mm-hmm. And, it was really important for me to tell you, and because you'd been on this journey and you're a sister to me. But I also knew that it was going to be hard news to receive, because we've been through this together, endless phone calls, tears, accountability, etc. So I held both of those, because I was very excited to share that with you, but also really sensitive to what that would mean, because I know, on the other side of that, I would have felt a certain way. I felt a certain way seeing other people get engaged, other people getting pregnant, and like the duality of like, I'm so happy for you, but I'm like so devastated for me. And so I shared the news with you, and then we didn't talk for an entire, I didn't hear from you for an entire week. And that was really hard. And we've talked through that, and we've worked through that. But I think that's important to share here, because I totally knew that was going to be hard news for you. We had shared so much. I wish you had just said, this is fucking hard for me. I can't.
Another flashbulb memory, right? I remember we went on a run. And then we were sitting on the, like, in the center, the rock. And I was in, like, struggle bus zone at that point, like, really in a bad place with my own stuff. And, you know, we both have been through that, so you knew what that feel like. And you knew I was there, I think, too, at that point. But maybe not the depth. I think, I don't know. Like, no one can really know the depth other than...
as much as we shared and knew. And, no one's in your body.
Right, and we talk a lot about the ebb and the flow, right? Like, I'm in a good space, I'm in a bad space, I'm in a good... with this baby stuff and all that. So I was in a really bad place. And I remember you told me, and I was this duality, like really excited, but I was, you know, when you're in those places and you literally can't like be a friend to anybody because you feel like such shit. That's where I was. Yeah. And I remember thinking, and this is so funny to think about now, being like, why do I need to be there? Like, she said something good. Like, I'm in a bad space. Why is it my responsibility right now? Like, they should be reaching out. And the funny thing is, we are a trio, the three of us.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So I got a word from Jill. Are you having issues? Because not like that. Sorry, she was much nicer than that. That's what it sounded like in my head. Like, you know, Beth, like, you're not, like, this is a happy time. She'd love for you to be there. Like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, nothing, I'm fine. You know, like, it was just a weird...
Well, because I had reached out to her, and
I'm sure you were pissed.
I was... No, hurt. I was so hurt. I was really hurt. I had reached out to Jill, and I said, have you heard from...
No, and she probably hadn't heard from me either. I don't think...
She had heard... We had heard from... This is the first time I heard from you. And this wasn't, like, expansive amount of times. It was a week, but, like, you had emailed about the Berlin... You had emailed both of us about the Berlin Marathon.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe she was reaching out to me about that and then confronted me. So this is how our relationship goes, because we're a little...
Triangular.
It's like, which side are you on, right? So I was on the apex of the triangle at the time. I felt passionately that, like, you're in a good place, so you don't need it. And you know, you're so blinded by your own shit that, like, it's sometimes hard to see. And I only recently, I think, apologized. I don't think it was that. It was way after, I think. Or maybe...
Yeah, and that was... We're being very honest and transparent here. Our phone call to sort of reconcile was also a little disappointing, because I don't think you were ready to own that it was because you made some other...
Oh, no, I didn't own that.
You didn't own it. Yeah. Which was...
No, that was more recently after. I felt bad, and then I don't think I was totally honest at that point.
No, well, what I'm referring to is our phone call on, I think it was a Sunday. It had been a full week. We hadn't spoken.
I'm talking more recently, when we had a real conversation about it. But yeah,
I did we'll talk about that too. Yeah. But yeah, that was hurtful. But you weren't, now, hindsight, of course, you weren't there in that space. But it was really meaningful to me, because when you called and shared your news about your engagement, I was like insanely excited for you. And I was in Mexico at the time, and I called you right away. And you sent me a really nice text after that.
That's what it was.
That meant a lot to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing that we've talked a little bit about, is the challenge of, like, straddling both experiences. And, like, I have gone through the dating experience. I have utmost respect and sympathy and empathy for people going through the dating thing, because I have been on, can't count how many dates and how hard it is. And, you know, so then when you're in a relationship, how do you respect where people are in this, and, like, try not to mention my partner's name? Like, I have this just crazy amount of, like, trying to be respectful.
The sensitivity to it, yeah.
Which is what you were trying to do. But I think what that speaks to is you never can be truly, like, fully sensitive to someone else. You're gonna somehow rock someone's boat.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, now, I think maybe in this moment, I don't want to, correct me if I don't have this right. It's like, and we talked about this on our call, like, I had something you did not.
Right.
And
yeah.
And we can talk a little more for that. And now you have something that I do not, which is an engagement ring. But also bigger than that for me is this alignment. Like, you guys are aligned now, and you're moving forward and, like, starting your family aligned. And I don't have that for my second. But this idea, which you said really well on our last call about this, was like, just because like I have it doesn't mean you can't have it, or it takes away from you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think a lot about is the emotion of envy. I think it's the most damaging, hardest feeling to experience. And I think it comes with this idea of like, you're my best friend. I want to be fully happy. And why can't I do that? And because it's this insidious, like, anger about like my own, it's like a selfish emotion when you're trying to be a supportive friend. And like, there's such a dichotomy between like what you want to feel and what you're feeling, and it's the worst. During that period of time, like it wasn't like I was like gleefully not calling, like it was like this really
you were
sort of
you were suffering.
Yeah. And then feeling like, why does someone who has something I don't have, why is it the burden on me? Because I'm the one who's struggling.
I think part of what I was feeling at that time too is like, you always came, that was our thing. Like we came to each other with our suffering. And I'm like, I want her to come to me with her suffering right now. Like I didn't even want you to I don't know if you know this piece, like I didn't even want you to come with your celebration and like congratulations. I wanted you to come to me with your hurt.
That's so interesting. I think that's where the like perfectionism that like, you know, now like, F this, I don't have what she, you know, I don't know. It just, you get this competitiveness. It's not that I was competitive with you, but I think that inner like.
No, sure. It's not about us.
No.
It's
like I don't have that thing and I want that thing and someone else has it. And it feels like there's this limited supply of that thing. And I remember having conversations with my sister-in-law, who I'm also very close with. And it was like, understanding about, because I processed this with her throughout this whole thing, because I'm like, I feel like shit, and like, why does she feel like, why is it about Beth? You know, it was like a whole thing, and she's like, because evolutionarily, like women are fighting for the man, like we get one baby, right? So I'm like, she helped me understand that maybe there is just this like instinctual competitiveness that we have with other women potentially, because we're fighting. Men just spread their seed, right? Like we have this one opportunity, and so like it's not rational. Like there might be something visceral that happens, and that also gave me permission to feel envy, because I was like, this sucks, I feel like shit, I want to be supportive, I can't. And why
I think that's a great way to say it, like giving ourselves permission to feel all of it. And I guess I just had thought through all of our conversations, and
that we'd be real.
Like, and I guess I was disappointed, not in you,
right.
And maybe it was more like a reflection of like, what haven't I done to let her know she can come to me with her pain and her.
Yeah. I mean, it has nothing to do with you, right? But because in those moments, you're so self-absorbed and selfish.
Yeah. But we've obviously worked through that.
Well, that's the beauty of like, right? Because you're not going to navigate this in a perfect way. And like, because it is so complicated and so emotional. And when it's not rational. It was like my rational brain was like, well, I'm just going to avoid her because it's going to protect me. It's like it was protection. Like I was in such a shitty space. But yeah, you're right. Like maybe it felt like a separation. Actually, you know what? I'm thinking about this because I remember thinking, well, now Beth and Jill are going to have their thing. Now they're both mothers, and I'm going to be the odd man out. I think.
Yeah, because here's this, and actually, I have a friend where, you know, I got these things and she couldn't, you know, that separation like took us off our similar paths and we're no longer friends. But yeah, that separation makes sense to me a lot because here we are like such a team and in the trenches together with all of this, and now it's like, am I out of the trenches? Like, am I there by myself?
Well, that's the thing, and that's how I feel with some of this that's going on like now with my friends who are single or with us, right? Being like, I don't want to, I can resonate with your experience. Like, I don't want you to feel like you can't talk to me about those things because I'm in a slightly different place, right? And so I'm really happy that you haven't done what I did. But I think it is just such a tough thing. And
I think that's the thing with like any kind of relationship is that ruptures happen, but I think we should be proud of ourselves for how we work through that. And I think that experience has allowed us to be really thoughtful and sensitive to other friends in our lives or other women in our life that maybe aren't where we are or have gotten engaged or had a child. I think we try to do a really good job of being sensitive to that. But this is my hope with these conversations is like, let's normalize all the emotions. Like, it's okay to feel envy. It's real to feel envy. It's real to feel sadness. Like, and it's real to feel many things at once. Like, you can feel really, really happy for somebody, but also really shitty and sad for yourself, and let your friends hold space for that.
Right.
Like, come with your shittiness or your shitty
Right.
feelings or your suffering and your pain.
Yeah, to be able to tell them, like, I'm so happy and I'm so pissed.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a real vulnerability. And I think at that moment I felt like threatened. I don't know. There was like a certain amount of like protectiveness against my ego, I think, you know.
No, I get it. Listen, I still kind of struggle, and I'm in this space where most specifically to seeing other people get pregnant with their second. And there's still this response after all of my journey and this work and therapy and building a community of women where we can normalize these things. There's still this initial you know.
Yeah.
So it's real. I think it's real. I think it's very real.
I have so many friends who are around my age, a little younger, a little older, super badass women, and there's all these permutations of difficulty, and just to remember that what you see on the outside is not what's real on the inside. And I think we do a lot of comparison to what we project onto couples walking down the street, right?
Yeah.
And to remember that like everyone's got complexity behind.
And so that's a really great point, and maybe that's where we wrap up.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful to remember that it's not the fairy tale, and what you see on social media or curated in really this like beautiful way is not reality, because I think that's a narrative I own for a really long time. Like, it happens so easily for everybody else. Look how quickly they get married. Look how quickly they align on children, and you just think it's like happening for all these people. And here am I with Rob having these really hard conversations, and I'm proud of us for having them. And, you know, I regardless that we have them, we have an amazing relationship. But yeah, it's not, everyone has challenges and everybody has hardships. So I think we can wrap up there, because like you said, we do talk for hours. Literally. And we could talk for hours. I love you.
I love you too.
And thank you so much for being here.
Yes, my
thank you all for being here and joining us for this episode. This one was really raw and really vulnerable. So I appreciate that tremendously. And join us for our next episode, where we hear more about incredible women.